What is going on, Bucs fans? This is JC Allen here on the Pirate Parlay podcast on the Sick Podcast Network. Buccaneers got a new OC. Last week we talked about where they would go now that Liam Cohen had left. The week before we talked about Liam Cohen coming back, which obviously he didn't. This week we're talking about the Bucs' new OC. Some trade rumors. Could something be on the move with a potential edge rusher? There's a couple options out there. We'll get into some of that. We'll go over some of the grades position by position. Not necessarily a player, but position group, how they perform this season, and whatever else comes up. Obviously, comments are open. Feel free to hop in there, give your takes, ask your questions. We'll be answering those throughout the show. And we'll get into all that and more after the break.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Pirate Parlay.
Battle intercepted, picked off in the end zone. Bucs are going to beat the Chiefs. We're the champions of the world.
The sickest Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. It's going to be sick.
What's going on back on the other side? Again, welcome to the Pirate Parlay podcast on the Sick Podcast Network. If you're tuning in live, do me a favor, like, subscribe, turn on those notifications, tell a friend. Let's get more people in here watching this show, and it's great for the algorithm. If you're listening to this later, appreciate you guys. Come on over and catch a live show. We're usually live every week at 7 on a Wednesday, but due to some unforeseen circumstances, we're here till 5. At 5 this week on a Thursday, but it works out best because we did get to talk to Josh Grizzard, the Bucs' new offensive coordinator, and we'll get into his comments, what he had to say, a couple promotions on the Bucs side, a loss on the Bucs side, on the coaching staff, and a bunch more. So let's get into some of the smaller details, smaller news items here before we get into Josh Grizzard and his press conference, because I was really impressed by him. We got some after he did the presser, which went on for about 30 minutes long. We actually did get to have him one-on-one, not necessarily one-on-one, but with the media. All Tampa media was there. We got an additional about 30, 40 minutes with him just to talk to him and kind of get to know him. And again, really good communicator. I think he's going to be great for the Bucs. And I'll get into why a little bit later. But right now, some housekeeping stuff. So the Bucs did finally lose a coach to the Jacksonville Jaguars, losing John Van Dam. He was a tight ends coach 2 years ago before moving into the pass game specialist role. He has been hired in that capacity under Liam Cohen's staff as the pass game specialist because they already have a coordinator, and also in that tight ends coach position. So a lot of people were like, oh, he's poaching, whatever. John Van Dam's contract was up, so he was free to leave. Not sure if the Bucs wanted him to stick around. They've been speaking highly of him. Obviously, he's dabbled in a few different position area groups and stuff like that over the couple seasons. So, but lo and behold, he is gone. He'll go to work with Liam Cohen. It's not really certain if they'll go ahead and bring more coaches in. So far, Grizzard has already brought one coach in. That's Kefense Hinson as his passing game coordinator. But again, I asked him today if, there's an assistant or someone that he's going to look to bring in after losing pass game assistant John Van Dam. And he said he just saw something that him and Coach Bowles and the rest of the offensive staff will have a chance to discuss and see what they want to do moving forward. So no immediate move expected to replace him. However, they did make an immediate move, and this had a lot of drama surrounding it, especially with Jacksonville Jaguars fans coming over to the Tampa side, thinking that they've done anything in their actual franchise history worth mentioning. They came over and started to draw up some drama because Liam Cohen had requested to interview both Kevin Carberry and Brian Capucci, both of them offensive line coaches and assistant offensive line coach. The Buccaneers said, nah, not happening. They are not going to allow you to do that. And for good reason. We find out that Kevin Carberry has been promoted to the run game coordinator as in the overall offensive line coach, while Brian Capucci has been named to the offensive line coach from assistant. So titles and promotions for both of those guys. Maybe came with some money, who knows, but they're going to be sticking around Tampa for the foreseeable future. I got a chance to catch up with Carbs after the press conference with Josh Grizzard, and He's excited about, the position and the move into the role. He said not too much is going to change from his day to day. He was doing a lot of the run game coordinator stuff in the beginning. He also had some coaching tips for me. So it was good to catch up with him, and also running backs coach Skip Pete, who he's like a kid in a candy store. You name it. What is it? Like, you want a guy who's shifty, elusive, can break tackles? Okay, you got Bucky. You want a guy who can catch the ball out of the backfield and really make some things happen in open space, and is a hell of a pass protector, probably one of the best in the NFL. You got Rashad White. You want a guy who's just a pure natural runner who can also catch the ball and do some things. You got Sean Tucker. So, I mean, he's excited. He's excited for the continuity, especially with that offensive line and their continuity too. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. But some housekeeping news as well on the offensive side, but on the defensive side, and Bud Cannibal says still no changes at the defensive coaching staff yet. They have made one change. It's a pretty recognizable name, especially if you're a USF fan or a fan of Florida, because he was there for quite some time as well. But the Bucs have hired defensive line coach Charlie Strong, former head coach, bear with me here, at Texas, at Louisville, at USF. I think I'm missing one. He's been around the league. But yeah, Charlie Strong, it's a great hire. It's a great hire for them. I mean, you're getting a guy who's got, again, college ranks, but head coaching experience, defensive line experience. He's been around the league, around the college landmark. He knows a different styles and trends, and he's been at Alabama the last 2 years as a defensive assistant. Yeah, I think that's a really good hire for the Bucs and the defensive line. Those guys are already eating. Now to add someone who's at that type of experience, I think it's just a great thing for them. So we'll see what happens as far as the secondary. Right now, it seems like it's going to stay intact. Same thing with outside linebackers. Obviously, Larry Foote interviewed for the defensive coordinator position in Detroit, but did not get it. He's back on the staff. Rick Stroud broke that the other day, so he'll be back as an inside linebackers coach probably, unless they make a move. Maybe he switches back to outside linebacker coach. We'll have to kind of see how that plays out. But that's what we know so far about the defensive coaching staff. It looks like Kevin Ross is going to be back at cornerbacks, George Edward back at outside linebacker for now, and Nick Rapone at safeties, where it's been. We'll see if that changes. Again, I think a lot of it was injuries, but it's also good to get a second voice in there as well. I do think they need some new pieces, at least, if they're not going to. Their nickelbacks coach, whose name is escaping me right now for some reason, he's in a good spot, but I do think that they can, even if it's assistants, bring in some young minds and some, but we'll see what happens. Again, it just as difficult as it was for Liam Cohen to find an offensive coordinator because he calls the plays. Same thing with Todd Bowles, getting one of these young, bright minds to come over here to not call plays as a defensive coordinator, because they still haven't officially named Larry Foote the offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator, which he has been. He's been the co-defensive coordinator with Casey Rogers. So it remains to be seen if they do bring in a defensive coordinator or they give Foote that title. But that's one way that they can get somebody else in here. Maybe someone different, younger, with a little bit more experience here and there. We'll see how it goes. Or another veteran voice. So we'll see how all that plays out. But that's some housekeeping stuff with the coaching staff. And of course, Josh Grizzard met with the media today for the first time. He gave us a ton of stuff about his philosophy, about how he plans to improve the offense, about things that he'd like to change. And we'll get into some of that. If you guys have any specific questions, definitely shout them out in the comments. We'll get it there. But he doesn't really have much plans to change a lot of what is there. The install is going to stay the same. The name of the plays, the route concepts, footwork, all that stuff is going to pretty much stay the same. And what they can do is build upon that, and what he said, he's like, we have all that stuff in, so we don't have to do that next year, So once we hit the field, it's just a refresher. And then what we do, with the fundamentals, how we can evolve to the next level of teaching coverages, of technique, of this and that way they can expand the scheme continue to add from around the league, add from college, and can continue to put pressure on the defense as they try to score points. So I thought that spoke, again, he's only 34 years old, quite young for an offensive coordinator, although we just saw the Jaguars hire Udinsky, from the Vikings, who the Bucs did talk to, who's 29 years old. Again, he's not going to be calling plays, but it's one of these things where, these younger guys are getting more opportunities. And he's seen a lot. I mean, in his coaching career, he's been an offensive assistant. He's been a quality coach. He's done a ton of different things before getting that passing game title. And he's been under a ton of different coaches, from Chan Gailey to Frank Smith to Mike McDaniels, obviously, to Adam Gase, Liam Cohen. So he's got a lot. And I asked him that. It's like, does that, how fortunate are you, and how much does it help you to have such a deep bag to call from? Because I think that's one thing that really killed Byron Leftwich, is when his guys, when they didn't have the players, the stackedness that they did in 2020 and part of 2021 until injuries. But when they didn't have the stackedness that they had, it was hard, just tell these guys to beat one-on-one. Like, that's what you're going to do. We're not going to scheme you open. We're not going to do. And part of that, I think Byron just didn't have enough experience to fall back on as a coach, maybe as a player for sure. But as a coach, I don't think he had enough to fall back on to allow him to make those changes, not just in game, but also week to week, and month to month, and realizing, okay, this isn't working for us because XYZ, and we don't have the players, and yada, yada, yada. And you could see there was no change. There was no scheming guys open. There was no really kind of accepting and adapting to what analytics are saying and what the modern stats and modern things can tell you. And it was just very outdated, very bland, I'm going to line my guy up and you're going to line your guy up and we're going to see the best man win. And that's great if you have the players, and that's great if you can execute it. But of course the Bucs, weren't able to do it in his final year for sure. And that played a part. But, asking him, he's like, when you're a coach, you believe in core principles or core plays. So you're able to pull from those guys' favorite plays and things that they know, like the back of their hand. And, they know the adjustments to them, to be able to take that from each of those different offensive coordinators and offensive coaches he's been around, take that from each of them and try to implement. He said he thinks it's huge. There's potentially a positive not being a play caller as well, because where you don't necessarily have those tendencies of someone else that's been calling for 20 years. So everything's going to be brand new. He's obviously going to lean on a lot of these guys that he's worked with. Mike McDaniels, of course, is one from that general tree. And we talked about that last week, how that tree branches, from Mike Shanahan down to Kubiak, to Kyle Shanahan, to Sean McVay, to now all the many branches in his tree. So he's got, a lot of this offense down pat. And I think it's going to be, for him, it's going to be such a benefit that he's got so much experience. There's so many different systems that he can call on. Let's jump in the comments real quick, and then we'll get back to some of the things that impressed me from Josh Grizzard. Bud Cannabis puts the ones up. Acknowledge me. Burgers World says, so glad Grizzard didn't start the Tampa Bay chant today at the presser. Imagine Tampa Bay. Hilarious. Christopher Cole, what's up, man? Bud Cannabis, we talked about the defensive coaching staff. Christopher Cole says, still need to get younger in the defensive coaching staff. I touched on that. I do agree. I think that's something that they could go to. And whether that's D coordinator, I still think there's a possibility that maybe they're still evaluating their own assistants. At this point, teams are putting their coaching staff together. I don't know if there'll be some changes, but there could be a late change. We'll see. Gailey, appreciate you. Says, keep grinding, legend. This is your year, man. I appreciate that. Trying to. Rashad West says, Baker as a coach on the field is going to be the best part. Those guys going back in fourth going to be Magic Baker for MVP. Not really necessarily understanding everything you said there, but I agree. This is going to be tremendous for Baker. For him to be in the same system for really the second time in his career, that continuity is going to be huge for him. And I asked Josh Grizzard, what's going to happen with Baker? Can you put more on him? Is it something where because of what he had last year, and now that there's an install, can you put more on him? And he broke it down and said, there's different things that we can do where, last year we had these cans and these checks at the line of scrimmage, and I'm trying to find the exact word, but we had these checks and cans at the line of scrimmage. And now that he's had that, now he can handle more responsibility. And his direct quote was absolutely. That's why it's so great to have the continuity of the scheme and the coaching staff, so that his baseline knowledge of what we're trying to get done is there. And now we could put more on him to potentially get us out of a bad play or just something that we hadn't prepared for. That way it's something that is built in and not something we actually have to give him a play call. So more responsibility for Baker, but he also talked about Baker working his ass off and being the guy who wants that. Who wants that. And this is what he was saying. Someone asked him what led to him having a career year, and he said what he's able to do was take what we were installing in the classroom and apply it to the practice field, and then communicate that to the O-line, the halfbacks, receivers, get everyone on the same page. And by putting in the work behind the scenes to be able to go out and execute on game day so that the practice execution can become game reality. With him being able to put that work in and get everyone on the same page and try to take practice fundamentals to the game, that's where you see a lot of his success. And that'll be, and that's what it'll take to get to the next level moving forward as well. And he talked about that because he said, when you looked at Baker in, the spring when they're doing installs, OTAs, mini camps, when you looked at him in training camp, like they didn't really get a feel for his scrambling ability because Baker was just trying to, make plays to the air and stuff like that and get the ball out and get his receivers reps and kind of go with that. But once the game was in, it's like Baker, and you guys seen this, it's a different level. It's a different switch clicks on for Baker. And it's do or die, literally. I'm going to get this first down or I'm going to die trying. How many times you've been like, Baker, just slide. Stop running and stop telling him to get your weight up. He's going to get his weight up next year and hit you hard. Stop. But no, so it's like they had no idea. They had an idea, but they didn't have a way to prepare for that. And that's why you saw as the season kind of went on, there were more design runs for Baker because like, wait, this guy can go. And teams know it. So now they're going to prepare for it. So if you add it in, the design run here, design run there, now they have to worry for Baker. And Baker's not Jaden Daniels by a long shot or Michael Vick or anything like that. He's not going to blow guys away, Lamar Jackson, but he does offer a threat. And you look at the third downs and what he's been able to do and some of the things he's gotten himself out of, and he becomes a threat. So it was cool to hear him say that, like when he started running, it was like, and of course there's tape on it from last year, but really when you kind of get your hands on it and are able to mold things, it's like, that's interesting. And it'll be interesting to see what they do to take it to the next level. And that's what we asked them. Okay, this offense was one of the top in the league last year. How do you take it to the next level? What does that look like? And again, he mentioned, that continuity of having the staff and the players and how it evolved through in 2024 with injuries and having that ability to give more on Baker's plate. And he talked about wanting to get the ball deep down the field more, take some more deep shots. Obviously, you saw the yak and in the passing games to the running backs, and you saw the running backs get a lot of explosives. He felt like at times there were opportunities to take more deep shots, and he wants to get that part of the plan moving forward as well. So there's some things he's definitely going to change, and not everything's going to be the same. He's been in the booth last year, but he's also been down in the field. Not really sure how he's going to do that. If he's going to be an offense coordinator in the booth or on the sideline. Some like it even more, on the sideline, and that was Dave and that was Liam, and that way they can, be there and read their guys and then see their face and see what's going on. Others like to be in the booth and kind of have that eagle eye observation of the field where they can look at coverages and look at what the team is doing on defense and see how they, how they can attack it differently on offense. So it'll be interesting to see that and what he does, especially as a first-time play caller. But again, it's when these guys are and he had a good line that he's been prepared. One of his receiver coaches when he was in Miami, Sean Jefferson, he's like, always be prepared. You never know. And these guys, I asked him, like, what's the playbook look like? Are you like taking things out and putting things in? He's like, the playbook is pretty much the playbook. There are some things that I'll want to do that we didn't do as much, or things that I'll, want to take out, or this and that. But, these guys they're writing on a napkin plays eyes and play designs and stuff like that. And he's going to have, he's had some practice mental reps, I guess is what I'll say. He said that he's been in the box before and like watching Liam and kind of seeing like, okay, when it's not scripted, like in the sequence of plays, like, all right, I'd call this here, I'd call that there. Some plays that he called in his head like were the same ones that Liam did and stuff like that. So of course it's going to be an adventure, and I would probably say that the beginning of the year will be a little bit of, I don't want to say roller coaster, that insinuates big peaks and valleys, but maybe some speed bumps, right? There's a little bumps in the road, potholes, until he gets it down. But I think he's going to be fine. There's a lot of dialogue between him and Liam, between him and Mike McDaniel, kind of with some of the stuff as that he was able to be exposed to. I think he's going to do a good job, and I think it's going to be good for Baker, and I think Baker is going to have another great year, especially if they can add to it or keep it at the same. You keep Bredesen, I think you're in a good position. If you upgrade it, maybe through the draft or whatever, I think you're still in a good position. So, yeah, that was one thing, some things that really intrigued me with what he said as far as about how he can take the offense to the next level, how Baker Mayfield can get better, and just how he plans on going about calling plays and potentially where from. So we'll jump back into more from Grizzard, but we'll jump back into your comments. Berger said, why Hendrickson over Miles besides the obvious price tag? I think it's Miles over Hendrickson every day. They're going to be the same age. I think Hendrickson turns 31 soon. Miles might already be 31, or they're about the same age though. But Miles is defensive player of the year. Hendrickson over Miles is because of the obvious price tag. That's what it comes down to. Hendrickson's still going to get like $30 to $35 million a year, not the 40 that Myles Garrett's going to get, but he's still going to get paid a pretty penny over the next 2-3 years. I think when it comes down to it, it's going to be what it costs in draft capital. And we know Jason Light loves his draft picks, and for a good reason though. I mean, look at, 4 starters out of last year's draft. Not too bad at all. You look at the rest of them, he's got 4 guys up for contract extensions this year that at least 2 of them definitely need to get done, maybe 3 of them. If you look at Luke Gedeke, Zion McCollum, K-Dot, and Rashad White, all of those guys need contract extensions, or else they're going to be able to test free agency after next season. So he's done a good job drafting. So I get it. Do I think they are a Myles Garrett away from a Super Bowl? I don't know. I think a Myles Garrett and some moves puts him in a Super Bowl, but maybe like, of course, linebacker, right? Who knows about Levante, safety, cornerback depth. I think you need some other additional pieces. I don't think it's like, all we need is Myles Garrett and we're there. Good. Which is why I think you can give 2 first-round draft picks and a $40 million a year contract over the next 3 to 4 years for Myles Garrett. And Myles is probably going to be pushing for a 4 to 5 year deal. He's not going to want a 3-year deal. He's not 27, who will be 30 the next time, or 29 when his deal comes up. I don't know if that's the thing. I think Hendrickson's probably going to cost you maybe a 2 this year and a 5 next year, something like that. And of course, some money. So I think that's why you go Hendrickson over Myles Garrett. Hendrickson, again, both of them play in 4-3 defenses, so they're going to be these hybrid edge rushers. We'll see. I think Todd Bowles would change up some of the scheme and system that he uses to be able to take advantage of those guys. But Edge is one of these positions where, yeah, maybe you have two guys available in Hendrickson and Garrett, but there's not much available in free agency. I mean, if you look at the free agent market, you got Khalil Mack, who probably headlines it, but again, he's 34 and coming off a $19 million a year contract. Is he going to want the similar? You have Hassan Reddick, who coming off a holdout through the season and 1 sack and was 10 or 7 games for the Jets. DeMarcus Lawrence coming off a season-ending injury. Chase Young is not Chase Young. Matt Judon is 33 years old, and he didn't really do too much. Josh Sweat is a popular one for Bucs fans. They want that, but I don't know if he hasn't been Josh Sweat either. Then you got Charles Omenihu, the Charles from the Chiefs, Marcus Davenport, Dietrich Wise, and then you're back to your guys. Like, all right, you're going to sign Brandon Graham or Clellan Ferrell or Emmanuel Ogba or Dante Fowler Jr. You're going to bring Anthony Nelson back. Like, Anthony Nelson's younger than all those guys, and I don't know if that's the route you go. Maybe you feel like you can turn Peyton Turner around, who's with the Saints, or Josh Uche around. Both of them still in their late 20s, But really, Aziz Ujulari, Deo Adebingo, Joseph Asai, those are some other names maybe. But again, none of those are move the needle names, right? Those are guys who are now in a rotation. None of those are coming in and being a starter unless they win the job. They got a battle. So Hendrickson comes in right away. He's a starter. Miles comes in right away. He's a starter. Obviously, Max Crosby, Micah Parsons, those guys are starters. And there's a lot of guys in the draft, and we'll notate all of them. And everyone's heard of Mike Green, Shamar Stewart, Abdul Carter's not getting anywhere near the Bucs. At that point, you might as well trade 2 firsts for Miles if you're going to trade it for him. James Pierce Jr., who's one of my favorites. There's a ton of edge rushers who could fit what the Bucs need. So Hendrickson over Miles because of cost, and that's what it is. Obvious price tag, and that's pretty much what it would come down to. Because I think you can trade for Hendrickson. There's a situation where you trade a second and a 5 next year for Hendrickson. Maybe you trade, a Jamel Dean or something, pick up a 4th. Maybe you take that number 19 overall pick and you trade it back with maybe a Commanders or a Bills or an Eagles team who thinks they're a piece away, and you pick up an extra second round pick and maybe So there's things they can do, more so to manipulate the draft board and add picks and put themselves in a good position. I think with Hendrickson, with that draft capital over Myles Garrett is probably going to cost you a 1st this year, at least, and a 1st next year. You can trade down, I think, manipulate, get an early 3rd or a late 2nd or something like that if you're trading far back enough. So that's just my piece on it. We'll see. I guess Myles Garrett, again, I don't put too much stock in this because it's NFL rumors on X, but apparently the Bucs are one of his preferred destinations. So we'll see how that goes. I wouldn't hold my breath on a Myles Garrett. I think Trey Hendrickson, as many do, my constituents out there think Trey Hendrickson could be a real possibility. I want to give a shout out to one of our sponsors here at the Pirate Parlay Podcast, FanGo tickets, guys. It's football season's over, but it's hockey season in full swing, and it's getting ready. I think 25 days until baseball starts for the Rays. So if you're tired of getting blitzed by big ticketing companies, turn to FanGo, the exclusively locally owned and operated Tampa Bay ticketing partner that offers fans like you full transparency. They prioritize fair pricing and no hidden fees so that Tampa fans can enjoy events without unexpected costs. Visit fango.com for unbeatable prices, personalized seat selection, and local partnerships that will take your game day to the next level. FanGo Tickets, your number one source for live events in Tampa Bay. They have cheap tickets. Like, you could get in the Lightning game the other day for like $17. And if you've ever been to a Lightning game, even in the balcony, there's really no bad seat. You're like right on the way they structured the stadium, or the arena rather, you're like right on top of the ice. So even if you're like last row balcony, you're still in a pretty good seat. But $17 just to get in the building. And then you just kind of move around. See an open seat, or not. If you're ethical, you don't, But if you want to take someone's seat who's not sitting there, go ahead. But I digress. And they also have all these awesome partnerships, hat tricks, a bunch of different hotels, bars, restaurants, etc. Go on fango.com. You can check it out, and you can package your deal so everything's combined into one. You have your parking, you have your game, you have your pregame, all set, all in one. Check them out. Fango tickets on X, Instagram, and of course their website at fangotickets.com. So super excited about what they're doing over there. Again, if you want to go see a hockey game or a Rays game, they also have like concerts and stuff like that. College games, check them all out. So again, I mentioned that Grizzard did bring someone in already on the offensive side of the ball with John Van Dam leaving. We'll see who it is, but he did bring in one of his old coaches. It wasn't his direct coach, but a coach at Yale in Kefense Heisen. It was I asked him, why he wanted to bring him in. And he said, when I knew I wanted to get into coaching, it was really him. When he played safety at Yale, it was really him that invited me, allowed me to come sit in the meeting rooms with him, watch tape with the quarterbacks, the wide receivers, try to understand that side of the ball. And he's just learned so much football from him in college. And then when he made that decision to get in coaching, he was someone who's been a mentor for him since, almost 15 years now, in everything, schematically, life, job advice, if you should take this job or that job. And also he's got a proven track record of what he's done in college too. He said he's going to be a big asset, not only to himself, but most importantly, the players and the rest of the people on the team. So, that was one of those things where usually when you bring an OC, they bring in a lot of their own people to work on that staff. We've seen one person, looks like he's going to keep the rest of the guys on staff from what I'm hearing, but if he adds to it, we'll kind of see how that goes. And who he adds to it, where they're slotted in, and what they can bring to this. So it was definitely an interesting. You could tell it was one of it. He's not used to. I don't think. He spoke last year, but he's not used to speaking a lot. So that charisma that you got from Liam and that charisma you got from Dave, you didn't necessarily feel that, but you felt a guy who knows football, who generally understands what it's going to be. He's not going to be flashy about it, the Bucs fans and the media, but it is really going to kind of hone in on the X's and O's and what it takes to win. And I think they're in a really good spot. This with this hire. Again, he's young. He's 34 years old. Tons of room to grow. And if Bulls track record's anything, first-time play callers in the NFL have turned out pretty well from the last 2 times. So it's interesting, and for Bulls, Grizzard was asked what that interview looked like. Bulls is pretty good at it at this point. And he said, what we really touched on was my vision for moving forward, whether it be the offensive roster, how I do schedules different, how I would practice would be conducted differently. One thing that's really cool that he brought up before we could ask him is they're going to have a lot of these call-it periods, and they did that with Dave Canales last 2 years ago and with Liam Cohen last year as well, is where it's live, right? So you're going in there, you've got your play calls. Bulls got his play calls. He's going to send some of these crazy blitzes, and it's going to be up to Grizzard to combat them and give the players enough knowledge that, hey, when we go out there today, we have a call-it period, calling it live. So if you see it, take it, So that's going to be really cool. Talked about the call-up periods, being in the booth on game day or on the field, and just kind of went through his vision as far as, a little bit of intricacies on things that he wants to keep the same or just, and kind of just more behind the scenes coaching stuff rather than, again, that's one of the biggest reasons why players are excited, why fans, I believe, are excited, why the Bucs are excited, is to bring that continuity. There's not going to be a massive overhaul and changes. There will be things that he's going to implement that maybe he disagreed with Liam on, or maybe he's kind of had this in his mind that when I get this job, I know I want to do X, Y, Z. I told you guys, I think last week, I'm coaching my kids' Pop Warner team, the 9-10U, with Burgers World in the comments there. And one of the first things I want to do is I want to kind of, obviously I'm not going to try to step on toes, but I want to make sure that F&T is done, fundamentals and technique, before we get into more intricate things. I want to make sure that, when I'm coaching the offensive line, they realize that, Because it's not a flashy position, especially at that age. Everyone's touching the ball, running for touchdowns. Offensive line, usually there because you're the bigger kid or the slower kid or whatnot. You don't sign up for Pop Warner football after watching football on TV and be like, oh, I can't wait to be an offensive lineman. But offensive line, and you guys know, and Coach Grizzard said it, starts in the trenches. That's where it is. That's where football starts, is in the trenches. If you don't do your job on the offensive line, nothing can happen. Nothing. Quarterback's going to get sacked or get his ball knocked down at the line of scrimmage. Running back's going to get dropped for loss of yardage in the run game. You throw a screen and, again. So offensive line is the most important position, not to mention the center touches the ball and everything. So I want to drive that home to my kids. And I think that's the biggest thing. And with Grizzard, that's the biggest thing for him too. Is like, look, I'm not going to go ahead and change things around completely from what the guy before me was doing. But there are some things that I want to change a little bit that I feel like need to be emphasized more. And again, that was something that he talked about in the deep passing game. Doing a little bit more getting the backs a little bit more involved out of an empty backfield and getting them more involved in the passing game that way, other than just check downs. There's things that he's going to tweak. Again, he's not changing everything, but there's things that he's going to tweak. So let's jump back out to your comments here. I appreciate you guys in here. Busy day today. Bud Canvas says, curious if they make any changes at strength and conditioning staff after a season full of injuries. I think, Bud, I know they're not going to. I think the hamstring injuries, which is what killed everybody, right? Everyone's like, oh, the hammies. This is the most these Bucs have run in a long time, man. Go back and watch how much motion and movement there was. And if your body's not prepared for all that running, sometimes it's just going to happen. So I'm sure the Bucs, with all the hamstring injuries they had, that's one of the biggest things that they're doing in that strength and conditioning staff. Sports medicine is looking at, hey, what happened? Like, we didn't have this. We had a hamstring. Remember, Mike was right on cue every training camp, out for a hamstring injury. Other guys, hamstring injuries. And then for a couple of years, it wasn't as bad. Mike's not missing time with hamstring. And this year, they get more to this motion, a lot of movement, a lot of running, and hamstring injuries just popped up everywhere. But specifically at wide receiver, the guys who are doing the most running. So, they're not going to stop putting guys in motion and doing a lot of running, but I'm sure they're looking at something that, hey, we got to figure this out. Or maybe it relies on the wide receivers and movement guys to maybe do a little bit more extra conditioning and stretching and kind of getting that squared away. So we'll see. Christopher Slim Thing says, woo, go Bucs. Christopher Cole says, could Light pull off a blockbuster of a trade for a veteran edge or cornerback? Like I said, I think Trey Hendrickson makes the most sense. I don't see them making a move for a cornerback in the trade market unless they're trading Jamel Dean. Chardavius Ward seems like a real front runner right now amongst Bucs fans and some fellow media members of mine that think he would be a great fit, and I agree. I don't know where the Bucs are going to want to spend money. Again, I was on Audible's Analytics the other day, and I said, listen, if Jason doesn't go all in this year, he should be fired. And of course, I'm joking. I don't think Jason should be fired, but I think this is the prime year to do it. You got Baker Mayfield. It would have been even more so if Liam stayed. You got Baker Mayfield heading into the second year of his deal. Mike Evans headed into the final year of his deal. I think this is a situation here where you look at it and you say, okay, we have the pieces on offense. We believe in Grizzard to keep that offensive continuity. Let's dump pieces onto the defensive side and let's get this thing going. So I think that's more likely. Again, Hendrickson, I don't see Myles Garrett. Bud doesn't. I just can't see paying 2 firsts in a contract for Myles. I don't see it. The contract doesn't bother me as much. I think they'd be willing to pay. It's just the draft picks. Eric Cecil says Bowles needs a nerd on his coaching staff. What's Brandon Staley up to these days? Guy who can use analytics really well. I would say Brandon Staley's defense was mostly it was pretty dang good when they weren't injured. There's a lot of things they got. There's a lot of guys who were banged up a lot, especially Derwin James. Burgersville says, I really like Grizzard's one-word answers on the Bucs socials. Yes, that was good. He put out a video asking they asked to describe each player. I think Chris Godwin was consistent. Bucky might have got elusive. Rashad got playmaker. A lot of different things. Burgers World says, how much would the Bucs get for White, especially since he seemed butthurt at the end of the season and cleaned out his locker? I don't know what the Bucs could get for Rashad White. Running backs obviously are devalued. I think the value is coming up a little bit more, but there's still a devalued position. I don't think you spend a 3rd round draft pick. I don't think you get more than a 5th. And at that point, I don't think it's worth it. I think you take the chance of letting someone sign him and then end up getting a 5th or a 6th compensatory pick the next year. And besides, I don't think anyone else can do what he does on this roster. They don't have a guy who can pass pro like that. Bucky's going to be willing, but I mean, he's what, 192? He's not a guy who can hold up, get a hit over and over again in pass pro. So I think they stick with White. We'll see what happens at the end of the season, but I think White gets a nod to stick around unless he tries to force something. And then again, the Bucs hold all the cards there. So Burgers asks again, I think Dean gets cut. No, that's a tough one. That's a tough one because I think there are some draft prospects that will be there at 19, or if they trade back, that I think they could intrigue them into maybe trading Dean during the draft. I think there's a possibility that if they feel like they need to open up cap space, they can do it before the draft. Or if a team that misses out on the first wave before the draft wants to take a need off of their board, they could do it in between, when free agency starts to slow down in that first week or so towards the draft, or first 2 weeks, whatever. Maybe. Again, I don't think you're getting much. You'll be lucky to get like a 4th rounder, maybe a 5th, maybe an early 5th. But early 5th would have to be probably a team that has acquired that 5th somehow, But that middle of the pack team area right there, I think you look at the Colts, the Steelers, the Cardinals, some of these teams that could use a cornerback. Could think they're, again, what Jamel's going to cost is equivalent to what some of these guys, or less than some of these guys. Again, health issues on an expiring deal. It's going to be interesting. I say, maybe a 5th and a 6th next year, or a 4th this year, I think is kind of what they get. That's about it. Bud says, so Godwin or Cup at a cheaper price? I say, yeah, Godwin's coming back. I know Liam's going to make a hard press towards him. I would be shocked if he didn't. But I just don't think the Bucs let. I don't think he wants to go too, I don't think he wants to go too. I know Liam will probably throw the bag at him, but I don't think he wants to go. I think he wants to stick around, but we'll see, Again, I've been dead fast that I think Godwin comes back, and I think the team brings him back. But with Liam going to Jacksonville, that throws a wrinkle. With Spy going to Las Vegas, that throws a wrinkle. Those throw wrinkles in there. Tom calls in and say, hey, we're building something. Like Tom Brady, his words carry weight. Liam Cohen just put Chris Godwin in the best position of his entire career. There's no discount coming if Chris Godwin didn't stay healthy. He's gone. He's likely gone. I think he would have won the Triple Crown. So I don't think he goes anywhere. But who knows? It will be interesting to see. Maybe Cup could be a fallback plan if he gets cut. But I don't know. Clock 5 says, give me a Mac free agent and keep the draft picks. Yeah, I mean, you look at Mac, and he's been productive. He had 17 sacks, I think, last year, or somewhere. He led the league in sacks 2 years ago. Last year, dropped down to 6. He's 34 years old. He's probably going to command north of $20 million per year. He's probably not going to sign a multi-year deal, probably year to year at this point. Would you pay? Now that becomes a question. Would you pay $20 million for 34, 35-year-old Khalil Mack, who has regressed in sacks in the last year? You tell me. To me, I'm not doing it. Not at that price range. 20 to 22 million is not signing up for that. Not for a 34-year-old edge rusher. Because if it wasn't last year, which it started to, and the pressures were still there last year, I can tell you how much pressure, if you give me a second, how many pressures Mac had. Because they were still up there. But again, the sacks fell, so it's one of these things where kind of what are you looking at? What means most to you? What can you do with that $22.5 million? Is there something, could you use it at XYZ and improve your staff, your team that way? Do you think Mac can still be that guy who can put up, let's see, last year, yeah, it was 17 sacks. It's tough because PFF counts half sacks as full sacks. So this year it says he's got 9, but he only had 6 because he had some half sacks. So last season he had 52 pressures. So still up there in pressures. The season prior, he had 88 pressures. So, and then 59 the season prior and, under 10 sacks. So, his Chicago season in 2021, he was injured. Doesn't really count. He still ended up getting 6 sacks on there, only 22 pressures. And then, 59 pressures, 70, 73, 79. That was when he was at his peak. 98, 82. Do you think he's got another 88 pressure season in him? He was good in coverage. He's good in pass rush, obviously as a pass rusher. He's gotten better as a run defender. His tackling, though, leaves some to be desired. 8 missed tackles last year. He had a 47.2 missed tackle rate. Wasn't strong. Again, if you want Khalil Mack, you have to be dead fast that he's got another 80 pressure season in him, another 10+ sack, or else I'm not paying that much money for him. I'd rather pay a second-round draft pick and get Hendrickson and pay him for 4 years younger for 3 years and see how that works out. But it'll be interesting to see kind of how it all plays out, how they decide to build their roster. Defense definitely needs to take priority. That needs to be the front of the line. Burgers World says if he comes in and makes an impact like Rice did back in the day, sell the farm. Right. I mean, if that's the thing. Bud says, think we bring Bryce Hall back for a chance at redemption. He's still young and get him at a fair price. I think Bryce would come back, but again, that's coming back as a depth piece, and we'll see how that goes. Cole says I would keep as many cornerbacks as possible and add to it. Bud says agree, Chris, especially with possible injuries. Chris Cole says Yaya, Braswell, Watts, Ramirez could be the top 4 in the rotation. It won't be. Yaya, I think, will still be there. I think they would probably, if the number doesn't get outrageous, re-sign Anthony Nelson. I think Joe Tryon-Shrink is probably gone at this point. And then whether they add to the draft or with, free agency or trade, I think that rounds out their room. So you'll have Yaya, draft / free agency / trade. Chris Braswell will be your top 3, Anthony Nelson, and then you'll have Watson, Ramirez probably either battle it out or both make the team as a 6th rusher. Unless they double dip. They can always double dip. They could always go to free agency and the draft or trade and the draft if they feel like they need more guys in that room. I think they need a speed rusher, a guy who has bend and can be a speed rush and situational pass rush type guy. But that's not typically Bull's MO. That's not what he looks for in his outside linebackers, edge rushers. And that's why I'm largely Braswell. I did a scouting report on him, but he was off my board for the Bucs last year because I was like, this guy is too similar to Yaya in the way he plays with power and push a guy into your lap rather than speed. Yaya's got speed, but Yaya plays a lot of power too. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. And I'm excited. Free agency is and draft season is one of my favorite times of the year. I'll have draft. I'll have write-ups for most of the positions that I think are Bucs targets in the draft and my best fits in round 1, round 2, round 3, 4, and 5 and 7. And I'll also do a mock off season where I kind of predict who the Bucs will re-sign, who they'll cut, trade, draft. All that fun stuff will be coming later this month. Usually towards after the combine. That comes out a little bit closer to the draft. Same thing with the draft after the combine's done. That's when I'll start to work on those scouting reports. But excited to do that. Bring that to you guys again. Of course, share them on here as well. But let me leave you guys because obviously we still did not get a chance to grade the position groups. Because some good conversation going in the comments, obviously, and it was a big day with a new offensive coordinator. So I'm excited for that. I asked the last question that he answered on camera. I asked him, you got a message, the crew's watching live, you got a message to the Bucs fans. And, he pretty much said, I'm fired up. You guys know the foundation that's in place. We didn't come here to go to the playoffs and lose a home game. So we're trying to take it to the next level and bring a championship back to Tampa. And I'm fired up to be here and try to lead this unit down that road. So he's I think it's going to be a good fit. I think the continuity is going to be huge. Talking to some of the guys on the offensive line, talking to some of the guys at skill position, just listen to some of the guys over at the Pro Bowl. They're all super excited for this for Grizzard to stick around. They like him a lot. They know, the success he had last year on third downs, but also in the passing game. And, he works as a passing game coordinator. You're working with a quarterback, the tight ends. You're working with pretty much everybody but the offensive line. And you're still working with the offensive line a lot. One of the first people I talked to after he was hired was Cody. And he's like, man, I love Grizz. Like, he's awesome. He'd come sitting on offensive line meetings and stuff like that. And I talked to, Payne Durham. He's like, he'd be in tight end. So he's just kind of had his hand in everywhere and really knows the offense, and the offensive players know him very well, obviously. And I think it's going to be a great marriage between the Bucs, because I think it's going to be a great marriage for the offense to continue to thrive and build on what they did last year. And I'm excited for some of the things that he talked about adding to it. Getting Mike Evans a lot. I said, is there, I asked him in the private one, like, is there any spot on the roster where you feel like you maybe need to add to, whether that's a bruising back or, someone who can play multiple roles on the offensive line if you need to, or a deep field wide receiver. He's like, there's going to be some changes for sure, some additions and subtractions. So get ready for that. And we'll see kind of what that looks like. I asked him on the way out. Obviously, everyone knows Tyreek Hill wrote "On My Way to Tampa" like 4 weeks ago, and people started losing their minds, especially on Facebook. And no offense, Facebook, but it seems to have less educated Bucs fans who really know the roster and workings of the NFL. X seems to be where, even if they are delusional, at least you kind of have an understanding of how things work. Like, you can't trade a player in the middle of the season, in the middle of the postseason. Like, it has to wait till the new league year starts. But anyways, I was like, I told him, I was like, hey, I saw Tyreek Hill was up here a couple weeks ago. You try to bring him up here? He started laughing. He said, I saw that. People started saying stuff to me too. I'm like, of course, everyone's going to. But we'll see. I think they should use a deep threat, consistent deep threat. I think they could use, I don't know if they need 4 running backs, but someone at least in the practice squad. And I talked to Skip Pete. He mentioned that DJ Williams, who's on the practice squad, is more that, grinder, that guy who can turn out those tough yardage. I think Bucky did a great job. I think Rashad did a great job. Obviously, Tucker, when he got his opportunities, I think he did a pretty good job too, other than that fumble at the goal line. But we'll see. We'll see what they do. We'll see who they add. I know they would like to have Bredesen back. They have a certain number in mind. If he goes above that, he's probably out. Same thing with Hainsey. Both of those guys they'd like to have back, but of course, all depends on monetary concerns. Outside of Bredesen and Hainsey, if you're Tampa, you really don't have too much on the offensive side that you're worrying about. I feel like, Chris Godwin, of course, that talking besides Chris Godwin, people. I don't think you have too much on the offensive side that you're really worried about losing. Could you maybe bring back Trask to be your backup? I think he'd like fresh air, some scenery, new scenery there. Could you bring Sua Opeta back to maybe be part of that left guard? Could you bring Sterling Shepard back? Justin School, I think, would be probably the most important one after a guy like Bredesen or Hainsey to bring back. But there's really not much. I mean, your offensive free agents are mostly on the offensive line with Justin School, Sua Opeta, Brent Bredesen, Robert Hainsey, and Royce Newman. And then, you don't really have any skill position players up besides Sterling Shepard and Cody Thompson, who is on the practice squad. The rest of them, again, besides Chris Godwin, the rest of them, Chase Edmonds, you're probably going to let go. Kyle Trask, you're probably going to let go. There's not a lot on the offense. And there's really not a lot on the defensive side. Levante David, Anthony Nelson, Greg Gaines, those are probably 3 guys that you probably want to bring back at the right price. Joe Tryon-Shinka probably is not going to come back, although I do know Bowles really, really likes him. He just never took that step. And again, I think if Joe came in and was like a 3rd-round pick, he'd be perfect, but the fact that he's a 1st-round pick, he'll be able to probably command more in free agency just because he's a former 1st-round pick and every coach thinks you can fix him. But, defensive side, you're looking at Tavier. Tom, we'll go over free agents and who I think will stay and go at another date. But to get to the bottom line, like, again, there's not a lot. There's not a lot on the offensive side for them to do outside of Chris Godwin. And a lot of those moves are going to be, what are they getting? And do we want to match it? Will they come back? Yada, yada, yada. So, all right, that's going to do it for me here at the Pirate Parlay Podcast on the Sick Podcast Network. Before we go, I do want to give a shout out to our other sponsor here at Mosley Heating and Air. When Florida heat hits hard, trust Mosley Heating and Air to keep you cool and comfortable. With over 25 years of experience, their family-owned business knows what it takes to keep your home's HVAC system running smoothly. Need a repair, a new system, or maintenance plan? They've got you covered. Call Mosley Heating and Air today at 813-230-3742 or visit mosleyheatingandair.com. Mosley Heating and Air, where comfort meets reliability. Check them out. If you're in the Florida region, they do great work and fair pricing as well. So definitely check Mosley Heating and Air. Super excited to have them on as a sponsor as we head into the offseason coverage. But that's going to do it here at Pirate Parlay Podcast. I'm JC Allen, your host. As always, find me over here on X. Find me over at the Bucs Game Day by Sports Illustrated. We are crushing it over there. And of course, every week here on the Sick Podcast Network, killing it over here. Appreciate you guys as always. Like, subscribe, turn on notifications, share it with a friend, tell your neighbor, everyone listening afterwards on the podcast edition. Appreciate you guys. That's going to do it for me here. We'll be back next week with who knows what's going to happen. I don't know. It's off season. It's fun time. We're out of here. Peace out.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Pirate Parlay on YouTube, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.